Hello and welcome to A Fistful of Movies this week. The movies we will be fisting this week, how's that for a tagline, folks, is Kramer versus Kramer as our classic movie later on. But right now, I will be having a look at The Nightingale, which is released here in the UK next week. It is directed by Jennifer Kent, who directed The Babadook, a movie I didn't care for at all. It stars Aisling Francoisi. I don't know if I have pronounced that correctly. That's what happens when you have a half Irish, half Italian actress. His name pronounced by an ignorant Irishman. Their name will be butchered. Isn't multiculturalism terrible, folks? Oh, how I long for the days when you read out an Irish actor's name and it would end in O'Shea or O'Flaherty or Fassbender. The Nightingale also stars Sam Claflin, Bay Cali Ganabar, and Damon Herriman. The film is set in 1825 in a British penal colony in Van Diemen's Land, which would be modern day Tasmania. And I don't know about you guys, but for me as an Irishman, and probably for a lot of people, I don't think there is any better villain on screen than the British Empire. They're so fun to get angry about and despise on screen. Historical Britain is my favourite antagonist, should I say. It's great to hate, and you know, you get a rush when you get wound up over things sometimes. Just look at Twitter. It's probably addictive to some, but I love to boo hiss these British pricks on screen. Now listen, I say that as somebody who has lived in England for 11 years. I like English people a lot, have many good English friends, and I don't believe in this almost Adam and Eve original sin that you have to feel guilty for being identified as a member of a lineage. I don't go to Mongolia and lecture the poor Mongolians on their terrible history. That doesn't really have much to do with anyone currently, and I don't do the same now where I live with English people, nor should you, to be honest. But damn, in this movie is the English Empire detestable, and I eat that shit up in the environment of a film. It's almost cathartic to hate sometimes on screen in a way, and the film itself plays kind of like a Western. I would say it is a Western in many ways, in the way it unfolds, even though I guess it would technically predate the Wild West, wouldn't it? Not to mention it's in Tasmania, but I'm talking genre-wise anyway. So something happens Claire, who is this Irish convict. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but she doesn't exactly have her freedom until this British soldier signs these papers. That's the gist of it anyway. She is kind of working out her sentence. I guess she is some kind of indentured servant. I'm not sure. I'm not a historian. But she lives with her husband and has a kid. But she is basically at the beck and call of this British commander, Hawkins, played by Sam Claflin, who is the ultimate bastard in this. And he plays his bastardness with almost a mask of fake charm that hides what kind of a controlling monster he is. A very good performance by him. So many brutal acts of violence occur in this film that turns this movie into a kind of revenge movie out of nowhere that sees Claire head into the wilderness with an Aboriginal tracker to get revenge on the British commander and his band of merry men. And I hear people say sometimes, you know, they use this and that issue as nothing more than a plot device. I mean, for instance, people use it with something like rape often. Oh, how they only use rape as a motivation for a character. To which I say, so what? How many times do we see a murder as motivation for a character? I mean, every fucking Liam Neeson movie. And do you know why it's used? Because it's a damn good motivation for revenge, isn't it? In a movie. And you know, if these things happen in a revenge movie, whether it be murder or rape or kidnapping, that's enough, isn't it? Even if it is a plot device, it's a good plot device, especially in a revenge genre. I mean, not everything needs to be explored or presented in a kind of public service way, or even handled with care to show clearly the effects and the ramifications of something on the wider society. I don't think a film has that responsibility to do that at all. I don't think so, personally, anyway. But anyway, what does happen that sets Claire on her quest is really brutal and harrowing, it has to be said, but great motivation for both the character and the audience to have an immediate bloodlust in our hearts, which is what you want in a revenge movie, isn't it? Now, I think Jennifer Kent, especially after this movie, is a wonderful director, but I can't help but feel that, and maybe it's unfair to say, but I don't know, let's call them art house directors. They kind of feel like they are above the genre they decide to set their movies in. Like, in the case of Badabook, I might be setting my movie in a schlocky genre of horror, but I think you will find my movie is saying more than that. Maybe I'm being harsh, but for me, Badabook, for all its praise, came across like an art house hide and seek. Does anybody remember that movie starring Robert De Niro? Now, in Kent's defense, she would probably say she is using the genre to explore the psychological mind states of her characters. In Badabook, it was to deal with a mother's trauma and repressed grief. And in this, the art house flourishes in this revenge genre, were my least favourite part of this movie. Thankfully, they don't happen too much, at least for a while. But at times, she does that kind of Lynn Ramsey thing, like just when you think the film gets to its most emotive, she manages to focus on the dullest aspect or angle to divert from the intensity of that scene in the interest of what I would say almost being embarrassed by the trashiness roots of that genre. Lots of people feel differently about Lynn Ramsey and Badabook as well, and that's fine, but it is my opinion. The Nightingale is shot in this lovely boxed ratio. I think it's 1:37:1. Is that how you say that? Fuck knows. I've never actually said it out loud, so that's probably not how you say it at all. But it was beautifully shot by Radik Ladzuk, and it's great to see a Tasmanian Western, and the movie has so much bite to it and hits so many notes of the genre that it had a lot of good built up moments to it, that when certain things happen, I wasn't as annoyed as I normally would be, although it is a shame and anticlimactic in a way, and goes back to my feeling with these directors sometimes, that these directors have in their head, but it's not just the revenge movie, whereas if they just had the conviction to, you know, make up a straight up revenge movie without having to, you know, quote, say something, they might have very well made a masterpiece and very well made one of the best revenge movies ever. So it is a shame that this film loses steam massively in a way. It builds and builds to something, and when it reaches the highest point of intensity, you're kind of left thinking, okay, we're going to go this way now. And while it might very well be an interesting kind of dinner room discussion viewpoint, cinematically, it's a real bomber, man. It really is. The other problem as well, besides some really ropey dialogue at times, It's funny actually. Some characters speak in Irish in this movie at times, and there was no subtitles in my copy, so I was forced to rely on every last bit of Irish I learned to try and figure out what the hell was going on. And I think I did all right. Actually, I didn't hear "I'm Will Catacomb Dullamockadee on Leheris." That's an inside Irish joke. Don't worry about it. But some of the English dialogue is ropey as hell, and the main actress Ashleen Francoisi. Again, apologies for butchering her name, but she isn't up to it at all, in my opinion. And the movie really suffers at times following her as a protagonist. She just doesn't have the presence, and I couldn't help thinking how much more the movie would have been improved by having somebody like Saoirse Ronan in that role, because I think on the British soldier team of bad guys, Sam Claflin and Damon Herriman, who is an amazing character actor, actually, big fan of his, showing up in Breaking Bad, Justified, Mindhunters, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, actually. I didn't even know he was Australian, by the way, but they are all top notch. But I think Ashleen and Bakeley, who plays this Aboriginal tracker, I don't think they are top quality actors. They're not the type of actors you need in this role. And although I did enjoy their character beats and their story together, and I always found there was such a beautiful cadence to Aborigines when they talk in English that just sounds so poetic to me, especially in movies like Charlie's Country, Ten Canoes, and The Tracker. I just love hearing their slang. I really do. I'm not going to do an Aboriginal impression. I'm not on my first show back anyway. Jesus Christ, that'll get me cancelled. And the pairing of Claire and Billy, I think the director does right by them as characters. It feels authentic. Like sometimes when you have one character in a movie that is oppressed like Claire, like they immediately recognize the oppression in another character or race, but Claire is pretty racist towards Billy initially too. It did bother me, but in a good way. And likewise, Billy is pretty racist towards white people as well. So I like that they didn't kind of sanitize the character versions of either of them, and it felt very right. I think complicated, flawed characters are a lot more interesting to invest in at times. Anyway, it's almost it's almost like an art house Green Book at times, actually, and I say that as somebody who loved Green Book, so I guess it's a compliment, not an insult. Although I have been using the word art house pretty negatively in the review up to this point, but I do mean it as a compliment in this. Some of the other authenticity of the time that Kent goes for, I think doesn't work. And you know, sometimes you got to pick your moments. So while it might be historically accurate for British soldiers to rape and pillage all around them in Tasmania at the time, like a bunch of Vikings, but you got to remember, if you were working within the time frame and the pacing of 120 minutes in a movie, sometimes if you show too much of something with something that is very restricted by time, such as a movie, it can lose its effect, and it can come across as overkill or even a bit unintentionally goofy. So I would say for 3/4 of this movie, we get an absolute A plus, brutal revenge western that is just very thrilling. Then we get something entirely different that kind of ties into what I said about Babadook earlier, where the genre becomes a means to explore something else. It is good brain food to discuss in a way what happens when a character with bloodlust in a revenge movie setting psychologically feels very different than they thought they would at a certain point. And I do think Claire's motivations are backed up very well by the use of dream sequences to show us her state of mind and justify what she does in the same kind of sickening, almost horror movie way that Trey Edward Schultz managed to present dreams in his movie It Comes at Night. So I do give her credit for that. So It's not like I don't buy the character feeling how she eventually does, but I didn't like it all in how it is portrayed on screen and how it happens and how the film fumbles. So the kind of alternate resolution it's now looking for, I just remember thinking, Jesus Christ, it's not going. She's not going to sing, is she? Oh Jesus, she's going to sing this out. What a nice thematical bookend to where she was earlier in the movie. Not really though. It really isn't, because you pulled the rug under what we were most interested in seeing happening in favor of something. Although I guess it's interesting to discuss and a nice idea to an extent, is so much more unsatisfying and kind of leaves us in a very lackluster. Here's my cat, in case anyone's wondering what the fuck this tail is. What are you doing? Come here. So it leaves us. This is this Mark Fermode or Roger Fleabert? I can't remember. I've named my cats. But anyone listening to the podcast doesn't know what's going on, but I'm a crazy cat lady. But the film, it where the fuck was I? You fucking interrupted me now. I can't even remember what I was saying. Yeah, but anyway, although it's very interesting to discuss where the movie goes from a genre point of view and from a movie point of view, it's a very lackluster place the film ends with, which is a shame. But for the most part, this film gives me more than enough to recommend it, and I am very eager to see what Kent does next. And I do think it's a big step up from The Bad Book 2.